Andy, my stakeholders hate me or my project. Not quite sure which. What's the answer to this?
Well, Stuart, first of all, I just love to have the opportunity to talk with you. But, the answer to any people-related question is it depends, right? So we have to keep that in mind regardless of when we do this. And it's easy to oversimplify it. But that said, I think a good place to start is exactly what you said. Is it me or is it our project? Because I think sometimes we take it as us, where it's not necessarily our project. And so I interviewed this guy named Mike Roberto, and he wrote a book called Why Great Leaders Don't Take Yes for an Answer. I think that's the name of it. And the idea is that the best leaders don't want yes people around them. And he has this idea called cognitive conflict versus affective conflict. And the idea of cognitive conflict is in the way you teed up the question. It's about the project. It's not about me. It's about the project. Where the affective is, it's more personal and disrespectful and things like that. So the place that I like to start when I feel like, man, I don't think this person likes me, or they're being really critical about something. I had somebody who sent me an email. They go, "Your podcast sounds terrible." I'm like, "Oh, okay." What I meant to say was, millions of downloads say you're wrong, right? but I didn't. Everybody just said, was it one episode or was it like many? And he goes, all of them. I'm like, oh, great. But I tried to stay curious. And that's what cognitive conflict is all about. Like, let's assume that the feedback we're getting from the stakeholder is not that they're trying to attack us. It's not that they're trying to sabotage us. It might be valid feedback. And so with this particular listener, it turns out he's an audio expert. And I'm like, well, tell me what I'm doing wrong. And he sent me like these waveforms and stuff that I totally don't understand. But it really came down to it. I was over processing the audio. And so I changed some stuff, and I can objectively say it sounded better. And so I waited a couple episodes to see if he'd say anything. He didn't say anything. So I'm like, hey, check it out. He goes, yeah, it sounds so much better, but I didn't want you to get cocky. I'm like, oh, great. Thanks. But my point on this one is I screw up on this all the time. So I'm sharing a success story, but if we can take feedback from a stakeholder as cognitive, not affective. Okay. Now, by the way, they might be directing it at us and not the project, right? And so it might be affective. It might be disrespectful. It might be toxic. It might be bullying. I'm not giving any room for any of that. But if we start with it as cognitive, then we can stay open-minded and curious enough to go, well, yeah, they're probably not just scheming all night long about how to mess my life up. They maybe there's actually something there. And if not, then we can try to bring data or arguments to the forefront, but in a cognitive way, not the affective way in Roberto's terms.
If you find that it is actually you, though, there's something about you, perhaps you've maybe that they don't respect your level of experience, perhaps, or they think you don't really know what you're doing, or maybe you're just a new project manager and you're untested and you're in this situation for the first time and you're being judged harshly. Yeah. What tips would you offer to a project manager facing that situation?
Yeah, it's a good one. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Robert Cialdini. He's known as the godfather of influence. And he's a pretty insightful guy when it comes to this way. And one of the techniques he offers in the book is when you need to influence someone that you don't particularly care for. Okay. My guess is, as you teed up this question, it's kind of like that, right? There's some friction there.
Yeah.
So how do you influence somebody? Because you can unfriend people on social media, but you can't unfriend a stakeholder. Sometimes you just have to work with them.
Yeah.
And so one of the things the way he describes it is you need more time with them. So he calls it increased familiarity, more time with them, but under positive circumstances. And so if you think about the type of relationship you're talking about, a lot of times it's, I want as little with this person, because even the thought of being in a meeting with them, I get indigestion. I can't sleep the night before. And so I want as little as possible because it's always like this. So what he says is you need more time with them, not less. But here's a practical example. I had a coaching client that was telling me about somebody on the other side of the business who he was on the IT side. I don't remember what department, but it was like a marketing or something like that. And he goes, I don't remember that he said he hates the person, but it was effectively like, everything's a food fight. Everything is just, just bad. And so I'd be like, well, let's put a little Cialdini into action here. Set a lunch with them, but don't talk about the points of contention. Just get to know them more. Try to, just learn more about them. Whatever, look for commonality. That's a big Cialdini thing. Is there something that we have in common? Even if you have to climb up to, we believe in world peace, something that you can find in common. And it's called the Franklin effect, actually, from Ben Franklin, who had a rival in the Continental Congress. And let's talk about something that we agree on and ask the person for a favor, but increase familiarity under positive circumstances. So to summarize, I would try to invite that person for coffee and or tea. Just say, hey, I got some time this afternoon. You available for a coffee? And I think it will probably surprise the person. Like they'd be probably like, what's up? And in fact, the guy I'm telling you about that had that stakeholder, he called that person. And when that person saw him on caller ID, the first thing he said is, what's wrong? What's wrong? It's like, nothing. Just wondered if we could go have a lunch, and no agenda other than just trying to get to know the person. And you might have to try a couple times. Maybe when you show up to a meeting a little bit earlier, just like, how's your weekend? What was good from your week, or just something where you were trying to disassociate the Pavlovian response of we see each other and it's immediate like this. And so we see each other as humans. So anyway, that's what I'd suggest. Usually like hate is not binary. Right? It's not they either like you or they hate you. It's somewhere in between. And I can think of a company that I started at as an employee, and somebody told me, hey, you got to watch out. And they said her name. You got to watch out for her. She's going to be out to get you. And I'm like, I've not even met this person yet. I'm expecting someone to like claws and, like sulfur smell or whatever, and as I got to know her, she wasn't a mean person. She wasn't a hater per se. She just didn't suffer fools very well. And if you keep your commitments, a lot of times, when you think of project managers or PMOs, people just want us to keep our commitments. Yeah. And maybe if they have something against it, maybe it's not that. Maybe there is something about, have we kept our commitments? Have we done what we need to keep them, sufficiently satisfied? So I think where it's easy for us to fail is to go 0 responsibility, 100% responsibility, right? It's them, not me.
So that addresses the them hating you, but what if it is actually the project? What if the project is in some way, I don't know, making their empire smaller perhaps, or threatening them in some way? Have you any tactics for someone facing that situation?
Well, and it probably depends on what it is that feels like it's the threat. I've had some conversations with podcast guests that I would summarize it as, we often say that people don't like change, right? We don't like change, but give them a 10,000 pound raise and see how much they hate that change, right? It's not necessarily that people hate change. They don't like to be changed, right? They don't like forced change. And maybe even more so, I don't remember which guest it was, but they said something along the lines of, it's not even that. It's like, we fear loss. It's really loss. And so a lot of times when people are reacting about the project, it's some perceived loss. And so understanding it from that context can make it a little bit more cognitive than affective, let's say. It's more about, what are they losing? Can we find a way to make it more clear? If nothing else, maybe the why behind it, because it could be we can't give them something. I had to learn this the hard way, Stuart, is I think I might have just been at the manager level, but somebody a couple levels above me was making a change that I just felt like was not clear. He wasn't making the what's in it for me clear, right? The WIFM, right? He wasn't making that clear. And I got on his calendar because I knew him reasonably well. And I was this entitled brat. I just said to him, I'm like, his name was Bob. Bob, you're not making the what's in it for me clear. I hope to never forget what he said, Stuart, because what he said was, Andy, sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's what's in it for us. So I think that lesson can be applied in other ways. Like if this person is against a project because of some perceived loss or whatever the reason is, if there is something there, maybe it's a misperception. If there is something there that is going to help them, let's make that clear.
Yeah.
But if it's not, can we at least communicate the what's in it for us, like organization wise, or how this helps the client, even though it stinks for us, like some explain the why, I guess, would be the bigger picture overall. And Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on this says when people understand the why, they're much more likely to comply. So, make sure, even if they don't agree with the why, it's trying to make sure it's clear. We're not trying to inflict pain on you. Here's the reason why we're doing this sort of thing.
Thank you, Andy. Andy's the host of the People and Projects podcast, which in my opinion is just excellent. You need to add that to your podcast list as soon as possible. Now back to the topic of stakeholders. I've been asked in the past a question about how to keep stakeholders engaged when things are going a little bit slow on your project. And I answer that question in this video over here. I recommend you go and give it a try.